By far the most popular video requests I get are for videos about the tortoises. Now I'm kind of running out of ideas for what exactly to put out there in terms of videos. I've done quite a few care videos, I've done some updates, and really not a lot has changed in my enclosure. But one of the things that I have yet to do, and that I'm going to do in this video, is talk about what I do for their regular maintenance. Now I do maintenance, and by maintenance I mean changing the water and tidying up the enclosure about every 2 to 3 days, depending on how messy the tortoises are. And based on that, we can see how often we need to be going in here and cleaning up after the tortoises. So right now it's been, I believe, 2 days since I last went in here and really tidied up. In the off days, really all that I'm doing is feeding the tortoises. So what we have here is kind of a messy enclosure. Now I know you can't see because you are on the tripod, but we've got aspen generally mixed into the coconut fiber place in here. The tortoises have kind of scratched a lot of the substrate into different piles and hills that I'm going to sort out. The water dish is empty and soiled, and the food dishes are a mess. So that's basic maintenance. We go in here and we dust off the different parts and pieces of the enclosure, put the substrate back in a more organized fashion. So first of all, I take the aspen and I put all the aspen back into the little enclosed area I have for that substrate. Any accessories and decorations that they've knocked over get put back up. We dust off their basking rock. And of course, by we, I mean me. I don't know why I'm using that pronoun. And basically everything gets tipped back to where it goes, where it belongs. Okay? So right now I'm just sorting through the substrate that we have. And what I do is I take the dishes out of here, excuse me, and they go into the slop sink over here for cleanup. Make sure I'm not taking too much substrate with me. And then I will go ahead and I'll pick up the substrate that's in here, just with my hand. Go ahead and sweep up some of the aspen. Okay, so I'm not looking for perfection here, because I know that the tortoises are animals and they're going to mix the substrates up. It's one of the questions I got recently was, how do you keep the substrate areas separate? And you can do your best, but we can't really impose our human need for perfection and organization on these shelled animals. And if you have tortoises, or really any pets, you know that perfection is not often on their mind, unless it's a nice perfect feeding schedule, which they expect of you. So we'll do that. We'll get out all the dirt, any waste that's in here, and that just pops right into the garbage can. So we'll clean that out. The bricks get dusted off, the dividing bricks. And one of the things that I will do while the dishes are out, excuse me, is I will take a water bottle, just an empty spray bottle, and we'll go ahead and fill that up with nice warm water. And then this gets just poured directly into the substrate. That's another question I got, is how do you keep the substrate moist? Tortoises don't like completely arid conditions. They like a little bit of humidity. That's best for them. And in addition to that, dry substrate tends to be dusty, and it can irritate the tortoise eyes and their nose as well. So what we do is we pour the water right into the substrate. Now I have a good moisture barrier on the bottom of mine. I have plexiglass and a plastic barrier. So if you're using a wooden enclosure and you don't have those luxuries, you're going to have to do more of a misting effect. So I go in here with my hand and we just mix it all together. Now this only goes into the coconut fiber place and mix. I do not add any water to the aspen. And this gets all mixed up now. So we just basically scramble that up with the hands and then smooth it back out. And this just keeps the dust down, and it keeps the humidity where I'd like it. Also keeps the substrate a little bit cleaner if I'm regularly mixing it. Otherwise you get chunks and lumps that start to pop up, be it from water, waste, what have you. So this gets this all clean, it puts it back to a nice darker substrate appearance too, which I know that a lot of folks prefer. They don't like to see the dried out substrate. And it also just keeps things a little bit healthier in here for the tortoises if the substrate is getting mixed around and clean, so it doesn't allow anything to really keep up in the substrate here. It just keeps that clean, well mixed, and much more sanitary for the animals. So now that that's done, I've got to rinse off my hands here, and I'll do a quick scrub just with a traditional kitchen sponge. Without soap, I just use water. Scrub out the water dish, which then gets filled, and put right back into the enclosure. Not spill all the way up, some spills on its way in. That's just fine. Now I don't put a huge priority on keeping the water dish full at all times, because I do soak the tortoises, but it's good if that is in there. And then I also just do a quick rinse out, scrub out of the food dishes. And then I will leave these out, actually, so the tortoises don't get these all filthy again. And we'll put food in here. So I usually correlate maintenance and feeding. So now that my hands are somewhat clean, I believe the last thing that I do here, well, second to last, is I'll just wipe the plexiglass off here. And that's more for me than it is for the tortoises. We'll wipe off any rocks, bricks, etc., any lights in the enclosure, just give it a tidy up. And then usually every other maintenance cycle, I'll go ahead and I'll add some more of the Bermuda grass or Timothy hay, depending on what you use, to the second story, which is where I use that. And I'm not going to add much because I believe I added it on the last cycle, but I do want to show you everything that I do here. Sorry I left that water running, kind of distracting from the sounds. And that is it. So the last step that I will do is I'll go ahead in here and I will add some spring mix, some greens to the bowls here that are now nice and clean. And those will get added to the enclosure and the tortoises will eat. So the maintenance is pretty simple for this. I like to keep things neat, but I don't want to spend too much time in here working. So what I'll end up doing is a full clean out with the substrate much less frequently, and this every 2 to 3 days.